Bach double together.
Yeah.
And then apparently
Nice.
the news liked it.
Nice.
It went viral.
Yeah, we'll have to push it because not very many people are flying right now. So let's get that article out. The En route magazine, Otto, is in Air Canada. It's Air Canada's travel magazine.
Oh,
And it's actually like people really like it. Like people actually read it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Excellent.
I
Yeah.
hoard them. I take them home with me.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, same. I actually have a little collection.
I also use them to learn French. It's like my way of studying French. Like I try to,
Wow.
because it's bilingual.
The articles are short.
Yeah, it's award winning. It's really excellent.
It's great.
Mm.
Yeah.
Only the best writers. View here.
Great. Well, should we get started?
Um,
You ready to
Should
go?
we
We'll
wait a
continue to admit
second?
students as they arrive. Okay. Good morning, everybody. How are we? Or we should
Great.
say good evening, maybe, to Otto across the
Good evening.
pond.
Good morning. Hi.
So welcome to Meet Maestro Tusk. This is a live Q&A, and we're welcoming all of our VSOI students this morning, as well as our viewers from around the world online watching the live stream. And so I'm pleased to introduce our president and CEO of the Vancouver Symphony and the VSO School of Music, Angela Elster, who will say a few words, and welcome Maestro Tusk.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks all of you for joining us this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. This virtual VSOI is so exciting for all of us. I hope you feel the excitement. And for me, it's another clear demonstration that there is no way a global pandemic is going to stop the music making. That's why we're here. That's why we're together. We at the VSO are working tirelessly to keep the music alive, and you young musicians are part of that. I will only be saying a brief hello and a brief heartfelt welcome to all of you, because I have meetings with our government in 5 minutes to make sure music is a top priority for this province and this country. So without further ado, I hope you have a wonderful time together, and it's my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce to you Maestro Otto Tausk, who's coming to you live from the Netherlands. Welcome, Maestro.
Thank you, Angela, and welcome to everyone who is here with us now. I hear you're having a great time so far. I cannot say how much I miss making music live, and especially with all of you. That would have been so fantastic to see you live and hear you play and make music together. But I'm very impressed to see that you're participating as musicians and as students in this way. I really believe that if we keep this connection going, and if we keep making music, and if we keep ourselves positively and optimistically looking forward to the future with all our love for making music, I am certain it will be coming back to us much sooner than we might expect at this very moment. I'm, as Angela said, in the Netherlands, in Europe. It's maybe, is any one of you also in Europe right now? Because I'm not sure where you're all from. I recognize some faces, but I also see new faces. So maybe someone is from Europe. If you want to say something, you should make sure you're not muted, but it looks like nobody is from Europe. Let's see if, nothing, no hands. So in Europe, the things are, although the situation with the COVID is not brilliant in every country, the countries are actually opening up a bit more, bit by bit, and also the orchestras are starting to play. I've just come from a full rehearsal with a full orchestra, which was incredibly exciting for me, because so far I've been at home, like all of us, since March, and I must say that hearing music live is an incredible experience again. So be prepared for that moment when you hear an orchestra play live again. And it also makes it very clear that the orchestra as a unique voice, we should take really good care of. And I don't think there's anything more beautiful than great music played by inspired musicians. And so that's to start off with. This is something that I'm sure you're all wishing for to come back very soon, and it will come back. So as I said, in the Netherlands, the orchestras are playing a little bit again. We have concerts for very small audiences, and this is something that will be followed around the world, I'm pretty sure. It's very strange to be together as an orchestra with all the new distancing rules. You're experiencing distancing in your life, I'm sure. When you go out, you have all these new ways of moving around in your world. Also on stage with an orchestra, it's different. People are further away from each other. They have to be careful of not spreading the COVID. And so it's a new way of listening. It's a new way of experiencing oneself and the colleagues. But I learn a great deal, and this is something also I think one of the most important things. When I was really young, someone once told me about what's the best way to live your life. And the best way to live your life, and I'm sure you will agree with me because you're all musicians, is that in everything you do, don't worry so much about how you're doing it. If you're good or bad or fantastic or terrible, just think about what is there for me to learn, and how can I improve myself in this situation? How can I be interested in what's going on? So I find myself, after I've been conducting for not so many years, but for a fair amount of years, and I find myself now in a situation where it's all new. It's like I feel like I've started to play the violin again, but not with the violin left and the bow on the right, but the other way around. So if you want to know what it feels like, just put your instrument in your wrong hand, and you will immediately experience, oh, this is how it feels like when you do it for the first time. And then take your instrument in your other hand again, and then you feel the difference, and then you know. This is where you come from, and this is where you've gotten to already. And sometimes it's good to go back to where you come from, just to realize how far you have come, but also to realize how important it is to be awake in every situation where you are. It doesn't really matter what you do. It doesn't really matter at what level you do it, but it only matters how well you pay attention to what's actually going on around you. And there was one of the, I think it was Jesse, if I remember well, who just came in, and it was really early at this meeting. And I said, I'll promise you a nice story about being early. And the story is about, I was once participating in a conducting masterclass in Italy. And at the end of the masterclass, there was a prize for the best student. And I was extremely eager to do well and to learn a lot. So I came really early. I think it was 2 hours early in front of the venue where the masterclass was held. And I think there were people on the streets cleaning the streets from all the party people that were there the night before. So it was a kind of a weird situation in that specific place. And there was a very old man sitting on a bench. And I kind of thought, so why is this old man sitting on this bench at this time of the day, very early? There's nothing to do here. And I didn't pay any notice to him. And then suddenly the orchestra arrived and the students arrived. And then we were all introduced as students to the orchestra. And then actually the maestro, the teacher, came in. And that turned out to be that old man sitting on the bench outside. And I suddenly thought, so I thought I was early. No, but he was early. So and this kind of again, it was something that the way of looking at the world is always with a certain eye, and you can be surprised by what reality is actually about? What does it mean? What are we seeing? And I think especially now in the situation we are in, we can look at music again and we can see how important music is, how important playing in an ensemble is actually. So the most thing I'm actually looking forward to is when we get back and meet each other in a year from now, because that's what we're all aiming for, of course. So it's great to see you. I don't know if you have any questions, because if you don't ask me any questions, I will actually keep on talking about all these things. So I think it's a good thing if you ask me some questions to focus my mind.
Students, you can feel free to just unmute and ask your question. And once we get rolling, go ahead and start typing your questions into the chat. And so then we can keep things going. So any brave souls want to start? We have a question in the chat from Kelsey. Maestro Tusk, what do you look for when you're programming new pieces by living composers?
So first of all, programming new pieces by new composers is always exciting. It can be a huge surprise, because even though you might know the composer, the new piece can be something totally unexpected. That's great. It's always good to be in contact with the composer as much as you can. Composers tend to be creative minds that enjoy very much being in their own world, writing their music, and then presenting it when it's finished, which is really understandable. But if you have any chance of being part of the process, that's always very helpful, because if you know where a piece comes from, it's much easier to have an idea of what it should sound like in the end. I always try to look let's say with a clean eye. Everything in principle is great until it's proven that it's not so great. So for me, I just look at the score and I try to do whatever the composer asks in his or her score. I try to play it a bit on the piano, and sometimes there's a MIDI file. I'm starting soon with a brand new opera, and the opera is going to be played in Amsterdam, in Bregenz, in Cologne, and will finish in New York. And I have no idea what the work will be like, but I'm trying to get the music from the composer as soon as I can and talk to the composer so I get an idea of in which direction it's going. And it's like being part of the creation of an artwork, which is incredibly interesting, but also very helpful for the end result. Sometimes composers need a little bit of help in the very end process, because a lot of things might be in the minds of the composers and maybe not very practical in writing. And I think it's our job as conductors and musicians to help composers, to help the composers, first of all, by playing them, because if we as musicians and conductors don't act as an advocate for new music, who will? Also, time will tell whether or not it was worth our time spending with those new scores. In many years from now, I'm pretty sure some of the new pieces will be still played and still listened to, and some might have their dernier at the same time as the premiere, but that's all not important. The important thing is that you try to bring to life what the composer has put on paper. But the question was, what do I look for in a new composition? So don't know if I've answered the question actually.
All right, we have a question from Kai. Kai is one of our conducting students, and he comes from Singapore. Kai, why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask Maestro Tusk your question?
Hi, Maestro.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Kai Jie from Singapore. I'm just wondering whether do you have any particular philosophy behind the rehearsal process? How much do you stop to talk to the orchestra, and how much do you just show what you want to achieve instead of talking?
Well, I think that question is essential. It depends a little bit on the repertoire, and it depends a little bit on the orchestra. I remember for the first time going to Russia, and I don't speak any Russian, so I had to show everything with my hands, and it was a very effective rehearsal. And I could cancel one of the rehearsals because we were so fast. So that was a very good lesson for myself to realize how much time I waste with talking. On the other hand, for instance, today we were doing a Haydn symphony, and you can play a Haydn symphony as an orchestra without a conductor, and it will sound pretty fine. If the orchestra is motivated and if they're trained well, they can play a Haydn symphony easily without a conductor. So the waving is not important for a Haydn symphony. What is really important is how do you shape the Haydn symphony in a musical sense, like phrasing, articulation, the energy, what are the important moments? How is the not just the mini rhythmical, but how is the big rhythmical pulse? What are the focus points for the orchestra? And I find that sometimes you just have to talk about, right, so the way we will phrase is this and this and this, and I need to add some slurs, and I need to add some dots and some wedges and some and actually then talking is you can't do without talking in that way. Sometimes the work, like we were talking about new works, about new compositions, you have to be very efficient in taking a piece apart, so the orchestra has a very easy entrance to what to listen for, to play the piece very well together. So it is helpful to be very analytical in a rehearsal way at that very moment. However, the concert I remember best, and I'm not saying it was my best concert, but it's the concert I have best memories of, is when I had to jump in for another conductor and I had no rehearsal time. And the other conductor was a conductor that never rehearses. So the orchestra was not rehearsed. I jumped in for Gergiev one day with the Tchaikovsky Symphony, because he doesn't rehearse a Tchaikovsky Symphony. He just plays it in the concert, but he didn't show up for the concert. So I stepped in and I did the concert for him. And because it was all so, let's say, there was so much attention to, so what's going to happen? We have no idea what's going to happen. We haven't rehearsed this. So any little change I wanted to make in the music, the musicians were so glued to what I was doing. I don't think I've ever felt more connected to the musicians than at that very moment. So in a way, rehearsing is extremely important and should be done in the most efficient way possible. But sometimes not rehearsing gives an incredibly exciting result.
Thank you.
So we are meeting later, aren't we? Not today, but later on in the.
Yeah.
Have you chosen repertoire?
Yeah, I have a couple of suggestions.
So what can you tell me the suggestions? So I can start to study.
Debussy, Prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun,
Yeah,
Beethoven Egmont Overture.
yeah, yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
And if we have time, maybe Beethoven 8, first movement. Beethoven 8.
Eight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, the Debussy's Prelude, for instance, is a piece where you can talk a lot about the way you're beating, but you can actually also show the way you're beating. Now, what you cannot show in your beating is things like balance and things like what's the color I'm looking for, and those things you can actually talk about. So thinking about what do I show and what do I talk about? I think talking should almost always be about your musical ideas, and not so much about what you can also show with your hands. And there are a lot of conductors that talk about, so I'm going to do this in 6 and then I'll go in 2 in the 3rd bar. And so and there's 2 big dangers about that. The first big danger is if you don't keep your word, people will be disappointed. So if you're going to tell the orchestra in bar 3 I'll be in 2, and actually when you come to bar 3 you find yourself stuck in a tempo that's impossible to do in 2, you will go in 6. And if the orchestra expects you to go in 2 and you actually are in 6, everyone will think you're either making a mistake or you've changed your mind really quickly, which is not very reliable. That's the first problem. The second problem is if you tell them what you'll be doing, they won't look at you anymore because they've heard it. So it's always better not to tell the way you're conducting, only in cases when it's confusing, when one half of the orchestra thinks you're in 4 and the other half of the orchestra thinks you're in 2, and so they're at half speed and they're at double speed or something like that. Then you just say, sorry, my ladies and gentlemen, this is really in 2, even if it doesn't look like it. It is in 2. Yeah. But we'll have a look. I think the Debussy is a fantastic piece to study because it's there's so many things going on in Debussy. It's harmonically, it's incredibly interesting, but also for a conductor, it's very challenging. Have you ever done it with an orchestra? No, because it's one of those pieces that you can study forever and ever and ever and watch all the conductors on YouTube, see how they do it. But it feels very different once you're in front of the orchestra. It's a typical piece where you find yourself in another world once you hear the orchestra play. And it's very challenging, but if it goes well, it's one of the most beautiful pieces I know. But it's very easy to mess up.
Zach Johnson, you have a question.
Yeah, hi. I was just curious if you knew pretty early on, or if you started out as a performer or something like that, when you decided that you wanted to be a conductor.
Okay, so I started off as a violinist, and I never thought about being a conductor until I was playing Saint Matthew Passion by Bach. I was playing in the orchestra. I was concertmaster. The conductor was ill or not there. I can't remember what happened, but he wasn't there. So the question was, do we rehearse or do we just go home? And I said, of course we rehearse. And then I stood up and I tried to conduct, which was terrible, but I did have a great time. I thought this was so much better than just playing the violin. And then that's how I actually started off studying conducting. I kept on playing the violin for a while. And then when I started to study conducting, I played a little bit of bassoon as well, because I thought it would be important for me to kind of understand what it's like to play a wind instrument. If you want to tell them what to do, you should know a little bit about the instruments and the way a wind player feels or physically has to be prepared to play certain things. My neighbors did complain, so I gave up very quickly about with playing the bassoon. But it was fun, and I think it's important as a musician to be very broadly interested in instruments and music and everything. So it's actually it was very I thought my life became much richer once I started to study conducting, because it's you have all this, you have all the scores and you have all these notes, and it's not just the only thing you are playing, but it's very rich. And so the moment I decided this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I'm still waiting for the moment that will tell me, haha, you made the wrong decision after all. But it's I think it was the moment when I just stood in front of the orchestra and experienced that incredible power of an ensemble making music and being able to shape that music, give it direction, and that's I can this is something we should all experience once in our life. I think. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Maddie Davis. Maddie, you're a French hornist from Vancouver, and go ahead and ask Maestro Tusk your question.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering how you see the role of the conductor, and if your view of that has changed over the course of your career.
Well, so I think the role of the conductor has changed over the years in general. I think conductors are becoming more and more partners in making music, less dictators as they used to be. So it's more making music together than one-way communication. On the other hand, what I find is that it's very helpful if there's one strong captain steering the ship, I don't think I've become more democratic since I've started in my ways of rehearsing. What I do find is that every day I kind of learn to listen better to what the musicians are playing. Every rehearsal, I try to improve my own listening to details, listening to the bigger picture. Because what I find is that when I listen really carefully to what the musicians are saying with their music, musicians listen better to each other as well. I honestly, I don't know how that actually works. I don't know why that is. Sometimes I find that when I stop conducting and I just lean forward to the orchestra and kind of invite them to make music, and I'm just as an interested listener, it's more helpful to an orchestra than by beating time every bar. We all know the next bar is going to be in 4 if the previous one was in 4, and we all know the tempo because we have been playing it for the last 10 minutes. So why is the conductor beating time all the time? We know what's going on. So somehow I think I'm step by step learning to do hopefully less and achieving more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maddie.
Over to Will Hartley. Will is a bassoonist joining us from the UK.
I was just wondering how you would adapt to, so when you're performing concerti with soloists, how you would adapt to sort of a spur of the moment spontaneous change in something like tempo or their expression or them interacting with the orchestra, and how you would manage to sort of catch that without kind of letting the audience know that something might have changed last minute and still keep the flow and kind of keep the orchestra still relaxed.
Yes, well, it's thank you, Will. It's a very good question. I think it all has to do with the same thing as what we were just talking about with Maddie. I think it has to do with listening. I think if a conductor achieves that the orchestra listens to what the soloist is playing in very detailed way, then a conductor doesn't have to do so much. Sometimes a conductor needs to warn the orchestra for a possible new turn or a new scenario that the musician, that the soloist actually wants to take. But if the conductor makes the orchestra listen to the soloist, and the soloist also listens to the orchestra, because one of the big problems is many soloists actually don't listen to the orchestra, and I totally understand why that is, because they're doing a very difficult thing, and they're under high pressure, and they want to play really well, because they know if they play really well, they will be invited again. So this is their main focus. But if an orchestra is experiencing a soloist that actually listens to the orchestra and sees everything as a dialogue, where you end up with is much more interesting. I remember the beginning of this season in September 2000, must have been 2019. We had a soloist, Daniil Trifonov. He's a pianist. He's an incredible pianist, and he's I think he's maybe the best pianist I've ever worked with. And he played Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto number 3. Yes, it was number 3. And the second concert was totally different from the first concert. And the tempo was, well, it wasn't half tempo, but it was really different. And the phrasing and all the tempo changes were approached in a different way. Dynamically, it was very different. So the balance with the orchestra had to be adjusted during the concert. So that was, it was really challenging for me, but it was done in such a clear and clever and cooperative way by the soloist that the musicians in the orchestra followed him immediately. And I think because of that freedom in his music, I think it came across even stronger for the audience somehow. But it starts with the soloist and the orchestra being able to communicate and to listen. And I think the conductor usually, if that works really well, the conductor is in the way then actually helpful. Yeah. But it's something soloists, they need to learn and realize this. And it's not something it's easy to do. It's really hard when you're under pressure and you want to perform really well. It's really difficult to have the courage and the experience to actually be able to hear everything that goes on. It's also important that a soloist realizes that it's not always about the soloist. The soloist also sometimes needs to take a step back. Sometimes there's someone from the orchestra that has a beautiful solo, and the soloist is only accompanying. And as soon as the orchestra musicians feel the soloist is aware of that balance, that very delicate balance, it's very much appreciated by the musicians in the orchestra. And they will be very willing to help the soloist whenever the soloist might want to do something differently. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
Ruth is next. Ruth is a violinist from Michigan.
Hello, Maestro.
Hello, Ruth.
I was wondering if you have a piece that you have not conducted yet but want to, or a favorite piece that you would like to conduct again in the future, and what it is about that piece that you connect with.
I've never done Elektra or Salome, the big Richard Strauss operas, which I'd love to do. I'm a huge fan of opera, and I think that the Strauss operas are so incredibly colorful and beautiful, orchestrated for the singers, intense experiences for audiences orchestras, conductors. So, but it's never happened yet. I've been with an opera house for 6 years, and I've done many operas, but never one of the big Strauss. I've done some Wagner, smaller Strauss, and I've done Mozart operas. And if you would ask me what's the music you would take with you to the island where you can only take one piece with you and that's it for the rest of your life, it would be one aria from a Mozart opera. I haven't chosen the aria yet, but I'm pretty sure it would be one aria from a Mozart opera. I'd love to do all the Mozart operas once, because there's so many and they're all very different. We always play the Da Ponte operas. With Da Ponte is the libretto guy who wrote everything. But the other operas are, I don't know what age he started to write an opera. Maybe he was 13 and when he wrote his first opera, maybe he was 10. I should check this out. I can't remember exactly. He was very young.
Jesse is up next. Jesse's a percussionist from Vancouver.
Hello, good story about the early thing before. That was great. I was wondering if you have had any regrets in your musical journey so far.
Well, regrets about I have regrets about not daring to take risks. I don't think I have regrets about choices. I have made wrong choices musically and professionally, and personally as well, actually. But we all make wrong choices. But as long as those choices have been my choices, I kind of don't regret the choices. I try to take them with me as something to improve. After every concert, I have a huge list of things that I wished had gone differently. Every rehearsal, there are moments where I thought, oh, we should have done that, or I might have said that, or maybe that wasn't such a great choice of tempo, or that wasn't such a great choice of repertoire. There are many choices that turn out to be maybe not the ideal choice, but I mean, the only moments to have really regrets is when things happen because you let them happen and not really engaged in making those choices. So as long as you feel you've done your best to understand the situation and make some kind of a decision, because conducting is all about making a decision all the time. So what you're actually doing is I think you're doing three things. I think when the music is playing, you're thinking about what's coming next. So your mind is a little bit ahead of what's happening. At the same time, you're trying to listen to what's going on. So you're kind of judging what is it sounding the way I was hoping for that it would sound? And the third thing is, if it's not sounding the way I was hoping for, what do I do to improve that? And this is where the decision making starts, because you have to decide, okay, so first of all, is my idea, am I right? And if you feel you're right, and if you think, okay, so I have to change something, then the question is, how do I change that? Do I stop the orchestra and do I just tell them what to do differently and then hope they will do that? Or do you try to mold and shape and move that so that when you do it the second time, then it actually changes by itself? Or you might even decide that some things just solve themselves by just playing, for instance. So there's all the time you're making these very quick decisions, and you're going to make wrong decisions as a conductor, and which is fine as long as you're aware of the fact that you're actually making those decisions and that you realize I can do it differently next time. If it all just happens without you being aware of what's going on, I think that's when you will start to have regrets. I hope.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Jesse.
Adam is up next. Adam plays trumpet and he's from the UK.
Hi, Maestro. So my question is, as a undergrad trumpet player going into third year, I'm really interested in progressing my career in conducting, and I'm just wondering, like, how do you make the transition from being an undergraduate instrumentalist to being a postgraduate conductor?
Right. So make sure you're very happy with what you're doing on your instrument first. I don't think neglecting your instrument is good for being a conductor. I think it's good to have an instrument that you really master very well, even if you will never play it for the rest of your life. I still think it's very important. If you want to be a conductor, it's always good to go to rehearsals. Just go to as many rehearsals as you can and listen to what other conductors are doing, how they're rehearsing, what kind of repertoire, how do they approach the orchestra. And I've never taken enough time to do that, and I think I still. So when Maris Janssons, the former chief conductor of the Concertgebouw Orchestra, when he was in Amsterdam, I always tried to go to his rehearsals, and even if it was for only 15 minutes, I learned so much of the way he rehearsed and the things he said, and I'm pretty sure that sitting in with rehearsals that actually are not so fantastic, that might be with conductors of lesser greatness than Maris Janssons, you still learn a lot, because you actually, if you see what doesn't work, you can think about how it could work. I wouldn't worry too much about learning how to conduct, because learning how to conduct is not so incredibly difficult. The difficult part is shaping your own musical ideas, and finding your knowledge in the scores is really important. If you feel you have experience already with scores, so you've analyzed all the Beethoven symphonies, and you know all the Mahlers and the Bruckners and the Brahms, and you have it under your belt, so to say. It's so what I did, I just formed an orchestra it was an orchestra that was it was made up of doctors. It was a doctor orchestra. So they're all heart surgeons or whatever, but they played an instrument. So I formed this doctor orchestra, and they just wanted to play all the great symphonies to have fun after work, and so I got a chance to just do the repertoire and just stand in front of the musicians and help them along. So there's a moment where it's good to have that experience. It's good to find someone who gives you the basis of your technique, and once you've done all that, what I did is I looked for a teacher that could be let's say find a teacher that not just go to the school but find a teacher that has a connection to an orchestra, so that maybe one day you can actually stand in front of the orchestra and the teacher can see you work with the orchestra and give you some help with that. I think making hours in front of the orchestra, like a pilot has to fly before a pilot is allowed to be a pilot. You need to make those flying hours. A conductor needs to make flying hours as well, and that's an important thing to do. Well, the next step might be trying to enter some masterclass or competition, or maybe find a job as an assistant conductor. But it's all this step by step. I don't think you should feel you're in a hurry, because being in a hurry doesn't help. Being very eager does help. You need to want to learn as much as you can, and all day. I don't think I ever leave the house without some kind of score. I always try to fill the little moments. So we were waiting before you all joined us here. We met online with Ivana and Kristin and with Angela. And I was actually at the same time studying my piece for tomorrow. I don't want to waste 10 minutes. Not that we were wasting 10 minutes, but I always try to kind of make the best of the time there is. So read your scores and learn the music.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Adam.
Okay, I'll read our next question. It's from Daria. Daria is in Kazakhstan, and she says everyone's sleeping, so she can't ask her question by talking. But she says, Maestro, thanks for the conversation. How do you win an audition, especially for a violist? What criteria do you have for candidates?
How do you win an audition for a violist? Wow. That's a good question. I always feel that it's a combination of many things. I mean, there's the preparation, which makes the biggest difference. If you're really well prepared, you have the best starting point. But that's only the starting point. So I remember when I studied the violin, I had exams. I studied with a Russian violinist, and I had exams for orchestral repertoire to prepare, and I had to play them from memory. Now, you might think that's absolutely useless, playing orchestral repertoire from memory, because you will never do that in your life unless you're in, I think is it called, or Adam, you might know this, is it Aurora, the orchestra? Where they play from memory, don't they? Yeah. So unless you're playing in Aurora, I don't think you will ever play from memory in an orchestra. But the way that you prepare something so incredibly detailed that you actually know the orchestra excerpts from memory, it's really good. It's really helpful. It helps you at the moment that you actually will do the audition, because doing an audition is it somehow puts you in a situation where you have to be able to kind of rely on an incredibly strong and inner trust to what you're doing. You shouldn't rely on luck or anything. You should really know what you're doing. But then you come to the audition, and there are all these different rounds. Now, in my experience, in the very first couple of rounds, it's important to play as exact as possible what's on the paper. So you have to play the right notes, the right rhythm, the right bowings, the right dynamics. It's essential. And because as soon as you don't do that, as soon as you start to improvise, it gives members of the committee something to say, well, that wasn't good, that wasn't good, and that wasn't good. So never give them an obvious reason to say it wasn't good. So just do as it's written. If it's a really strange dynamical marking in the parts, just play what's there, because if it turns out not to be the correct dynamics, that's a mistake by the librarian, and that's not a mistake by you as someone who does the audition, right? So, but doing everything right is not enough to get through the rounds. Now, what I always listen for is sound. I think sound is one of the most important things for a musician. It's one of the most important things to realize entering an orchestra. A music director or a committee a section, a woodwind section, or a double bass section, or a percussion section, or the trombone section. We are all looking for a kind of sound that will blend with the other musicians in the orchestra, and that also has a very personal character. Getting all the notes right is a first step. But the second step is make sure your sound is very well taken care of, that you realize in what space are you actually doing the audition. Is this a space where I need to articulate really well to make it speak? Or is it a very dry space where you need to work really hard to make it sound warm or give extra color? So be aware of the room you're in. That's something that's very helpful at an audition. If it's very boomy, make sure you don't play so fast that no one can hear all the different details and all the different notes. Just dare to take the tempo slightly, maybe slightly slower, so you can actually control your ears and what's going on. If it's a dry room, make sure the sound is warmed up. When you're a string player, make sure your vibrato is going on even after you think the sound has finished. So all those. So for me, the sound is one of the most important things I listen for when candidates audition. What I always love is if then doing an audition, the screen goes away. So the first couple of rounds are behind the screen, and usually the last two rounds are without the screen, so the committee can actually see the candidates. I want to feel a connection with the musician doing auditions. So I'm always interested in finding out what kind of personality I'm listening or looking at. And I don't mean that you should start talking and telling your most personal life story to me, but I want to hear in the musician. So this is why I love music, and this is why I want to play in your orchestra. And if that's done in a very, let's say, personal and powerful way, which can also be intimate and doesn't have to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be extremely outgoing. It can also be a very personal story, but it should be a personal story. That kind of would convince me a lot in an audition. Yeah. But you know, it's you also need to be. You need to have luck in a sense that being at a right place at a right time. I've heard many auditions with great musicians that just didn't have the luck of being at the right moment at the right place, just because the orchestra might be looking for something very specific. And the candidates, there would be only one candidate that actually fit in the section or something. And not winning an audition does absolutely. It tells you nothing about your chances at other auditions. I think that's something to realize very well. I think if you get invited and if you get through the first couple of rounds, I am convinced and I'm sure that if you audition again for another orchestra or for another college or for something else, that you will get through those other rounds as well. And then you need to be in the right place at the right time.
Let's go over to Joyce. Joyce is a flute player from Vancouver.
And buy the conductor a beer, that helps as well.
I was wondering how important of a role does your biography play, like when it comes to like choosing candidates, especially before the first round.
Sorry, I can you repeat that question once more, Joyce?
Yeah, I was wondering how important of a role does your biography play? Like how much like competition experience that you should gain before like
Right.
applying for an orchestra before to have your like biography chosen for the first round. Before the first round.
Right. So I will tell you that I once hired somebody who had a biography that said, first of all, was what's your address? And it was written the world, and that was everything that was on the biography. So there was no biography, and it was, I thought this person must be, the person came to Audition because they get a free drink or something. I don't know. I had no idea why this person auditioned, because I thought the biography was very, very strange. But the playing was so incredible that there was no biography necessary. Now, if I listen to an audition for the first couple of rounds, you don't see a biography anyway. So actually, I don't want to see a biography, because I want to be open to everyone. I want to give everyone the same chance, and I want to make a choice on what I hear and not of what I think I will hear. Now, that doesn't mean that all the experience is for nothing. I think it's really important to do master classes, to listen to other musicians, to be inspired by teachers, to play in ensembles, to I'm not sure about competitions is a different thing. I'm not sure how helpful a competition is. But I think a masterclass and entering, let's say, ensemble playing is really, really helpful in your personal growth. Of course, if you want to have a huge career as a soloist and you win a competition, that's a great help. I mean, it's I'm not saying it doesn't help if you want to be a great soloist that you've actually won the Tchaikovsky competition. Of course, that helps. But I remember we played with Gidon Kramer, the violinist, in this last season, and I also remember that he played the Queen Elizabeth competition and he won third prize and not first prize. And he had a huge career in his life, and he is an incredibly interesting musician with a really interesting story to tell. Number one and number two were also great violinists, but had nowhere near the same career as number three in that competition. So it's. I mean, if you enjoy entering competitions, if you think it's fun to enter a contest, please do. There's nothing wrong with it, and it can be fun, because if you can see it as sports, then it's fun. If you think winning or losing will define the rest of your musical life, I think that's a mistake.
Thanks,
Louis.
Let's go back to Will for an interesting question. Go ahead, Will.
I was just wondering if there's any piece or specific pieces that, no matter how many times you've conducted them and studied them and performed them, that you would be nervous to do and very apprehensive to play. Because I remember I asked Esa-Pekka Salonen, performing the Philharmonia Orchestra and many other orchestras, and he said that no matter how many times he's done the Rite of Spring, probably over 50 times, every time he gets to the bass clarinet solo before the Danse Sacrale, he feels extremely nervous, like he's not going to pull it off. So I was just wondering if you had any similar.
But it's interesting because Esa-Pekka's Sacre is incredible. So I don't think it gets much better than the way he does it. So this is an interesting thought. Wow. Let me think about that, actually. I think it's what I can get nervous about is when slow movements become boring and slow, and I kind of that's something that might be I haven't found a way yet to overcome that fear. Maybe that's something. I don't think there's a specific piece. Well, when I do the Rite of Spring, there's this I'm always afraid that I mess it up there, so I never dare to do that from memory, because it keeps on surprising me the way that's written. I have never been able to find the structure or the logic. I think I think one of the most clever moments in the Sacre is exactly that spot, because it's so it surprises me every time. Is that I cannot find the logic behind it, and so I'm always worried that I just mess up there. Yeah.
All right, well, that about brings us to our time. Thank you so much, Maestro Tusk, for
Thank you
this morning, and students, thank you for some great questions. Any closing remarks from anyone, or Maestro?
Well, I wish I could hear you all play, and that we could have played the Sacre together and do that da-da, and do it 10 times, and then without the conductor, and see what happens then. I wish that would be. I wish I could have heard you, Will, play the solo at the beginning. You actually know there's a mistake in the score in the bassoon part?
I've tried to find quite a few like facsimiles and original manuscripts, and I've found a recording before. It was very, very, very old. I think it was with Ravinsky,
yes,
conducting it. And they played it on a French bassoon, and there was a slight difference, but I'm not exact. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Right, because there's at the end of the and then in the score it says it goes down, and I think that's actually a mistake. But I've never heard anyone play it. It might be just in the score and not in the parts. I have never checked that actually. But
biggest difference I've seen was when somebody managed to find a part with on the high D. Somebody did an embouchure glissando to the air underneath, but that was about it.
Right. One day I'll hear you play it, Will. Thank you so much. And I'll hear all of you, I hope. Wish you good luck and have fun these days. Don't hesitate to ask the teachers all the questions you have, because this is a chance you won't get quickly again. So take your chance.
All right, everyone. So have a great day today, and we'll see you next time. And thanks
Thank
again
you
for joining us online.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maestro.
Thank you.